So, welcome back to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast. It has been over a year since I recorded with a guest on the podcast due to personal reasons. And today I'm going to share a little bit more of those reasons. So, you know that when I have my guests, that they're sharing so much of their stories, and I'm also sharing snippets of mine. But this past year, I decided that I would prioritize my own personal life and that I would not record anything until I felt like I could be completely committed to it. So today, I am delighted to welcome a very special guest as I return to my podcasting. And that very special guest is my wonderful husband, John Fitzmaurice. John, you're welcome.
Thank you, Sharon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today on the return to your podcast and looking forward to our little chat.
Lovely. Thank you, John. So, as you all know, this podcast is about celebrating the resilience of the human spirit. And John's spirit is very resilient, especially, in the last year or so. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that. But, John, I know you as John Fitzmaurice, my husband, also my best friend. And when I met you in October 1994, my life changed for the better. I'm grateful to say. But tell us a little bit about your journey going back, you know, where it all started, where John Fitzmaurice started.
Well, where John Fitzmaurice came from was my parents. They moved to London when they were quite young. My father followed his work as a psychiatric nurse, and that's where I was born, actually. Born in Paddington Hospital in London back in 1966. Didn't live in London for very long. Moved back to Castlereagh, County Roscommon, and before I was a year old. Again, my father following his work as a psychiatric nurse, and he worked in Castlereagh Psychiatric Hospital for many years. So I was brought up in Castlereagh. I went to school there, went to college in Athlone. Then from there, I went back to London again to live in London for a few years. About 4 years, I think I was in London, and good memories there, good times. But after 4 years, I had enough of London and wanted to come back home again. So the time was right. Work was picking up here. So I came back home in 1991. Got a job in Galway, and I was there for a few years until 1994 when I met my lovely wife, Sharon.
Oh,
And I suppose that was the next big chapter in my life then from there.
very good. So both your parents are from Galway, but you ended up moving to Roscommon because of your dad's work.
Yeah, yeah. My father's from Ballygar, my mother is from Montpellier. But my father was a psychiatric nurse, followed the work. So psychiatric hospitals are limited enough. So there was a very good one in Castlereagh. I actually worked there for some of my summers myself, both in the farmyard and in the kitchen as a porter. Big operation there. Enjoyed the summers there. Meeting all the different types of people. Really enjoyed that. But unfortunately, that hospital is closed now, and as many of you know, that's now a prison. But look, it's for when I was there, it was great, and my father loved that sort of work as well. Yeah.
Great. So your father was more than a psychiatric nurse. He was a bit of an all-rounder. Tell us a little bit more about your dad.
Yeah, he was a psychiatric nurse as a hobby. He was a farmer as well and a musician, so he had a smallish enough farm, but large enough for somebody who also had a full-time job.
Yeah.
So we would have grown up helping him on the farm, um, spending our summers on the land. Great memories. But also he was a musician. He was a drummer, an accordion player, a singer in mostly a three-piece band, and we would have spent a lot of our Saturday nights going off traveling with him, um, listening to the music, drinking Coke, and even playing the drums a little bit sometimes. Again, great memories.
Lovely. And your mom was a homemaker and she raised all of you, which there is 6 of you, no more than my own family. And you've great memories growing up, and I know from your siblings, and they talk about they have memories of you that you say, I don't recall that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful memories. My mother is a excuse me, a wonderful person. As you say, 6 of us. My father was busy working, playing, working the farm, but the house didn't run itself. And
Mm,
with 6 children and a husband to take care of, there was plenty for doing. And in the younger years when we were all young, of course, there wasn't much help. So I don't know how she managed it all.
mm.
Not easy back then. As we got a little bit older, there was a little bit more help, of course. But still always a busy house, but always a happy house, I remember. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Mm.
And I know, and many people listening to the podcast will know that our backgrounds are completely different, from childhood memories. And I always love listening to your childhood memories and all your holidays to Enniscrone, caravanning and all of that, and even the farm work and being busy, even though you didn't like it all the time, but that you were always kept busy
Mm.
and you have a good work ethic. I know that about everyone in your family.
Yeah, but it's the way our parents were raised, and it's the way we were raised. You chipped in, you helped out. As you say, we mightn't have liked it at the time. I remember times up on the farm in the winter, and I was crying with cold.
Mm,
But looking back, I wouldn't have done it any different.
mm.
It really developed me to who I am today, and wouldn't have changed a bit of it. Really enjoyed that sort of upbringing. Mm.
Lovely, John, lovely. So we move on to, when you talked about your time in London and, moving back to Ireland and moving into Galway City, where you worked as an architectural technician with the company in Galway City. And you're still doing that work, which you love.
Yeah, still doing that work today. I joined a company called HDL O'Connors, who later became OKM Architects. And from that, in 2006, I moved out to a smaller architectural company called Associated Design Ireland Limited, um, in Ormore, and I'm still there today,
Mm.
to this day. Yeah, really enjoy that sort of work. I think it comes from creating stuff, and being able to say, I made this kind
Oh
of
my
thing.
God. Well, I definitely made this. For anyone that knows John, we call him Inspector Gadget because he's a bit of a gadget man. And we have 2 sheds, and one shed is full of every gadget you could ever imagine and not imagine. I don't know what half of them are for. But of course, he says they'll always come in useful. And he still has, and we were only talking about it the other night, a welding machine that he got as a present for his 21st birthday, and that he still
Mm.
has it. So, absolutely, you're right. You are able to create anything. But the one thing, and we always laugh about this as well, if we'll say, oh, we want to make this, or I'll say, John, I'd like to put presses there. John would have to draw a plan out for it, get all the measurements correct, everything. Whereas I just buy the board, stick it up, and it'll probably fall down a month later. So we love him for that, but we always slag him quite a lot as well. So you were talking about then us meeting in October 94,
Mm.
which was, I suppose, one of those encounters because we met through Susan, a friend of ours, a mutual friend.
Yeah,
I hadn't known you before that, but you were sharing a house with Susan and a few other people in Foster Court,
Foster
wasn't it?
Court. Yeah, yeah, in at the back of Foster Court, in the heart of London City, or Galway City, Galway. And yeah, it was one of those houses where 3 or 4 people shared the house. There was people coming and going all the time, and I don't just mean on a daily basis. I mean the tenants would change on a regular basis, and yeah, one of those tenants was Susan, of course, and she then introduced me to her friend Sharon that she used to work with, and we hit it off straight away. You might say it was love at first sight, or love at first bite, whichever. Yeah, there was an instant attraction, and we just started going out straight away, and that's where we all came from.
Mm. So absolutely an instant attraction, but as most people will know from my own book, and on this podcast, that it wasn't plain sailing because I was separated from my first marriage and there was no divorce in Ireland. So I had said this to John, warned him almost, that this mightn't go anywhere because, where is it going to go? There's no divorce. And as many of you would have heard me saying, especially our friends, that John made sweeping statements in the first week we were seeing each other, going, well, if I have to wait forever, I'll wait for you, but I'm going to marry you. And I was going, oh my God, this poor man is going to be so disappointed because that may never happen in Ireland. But he persisted and we stayed going out together on and off a few times. That was my fault because, again, part of me didn't believe I deserved somebody as loving and as decent and as generous as John. And he could see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. So that's why I'm always so grateful to him. And while we were going out, I met all of your friends that you had growing up. You had brilliant friends growing up, between Castlerea and Junior Chamber, and they became my friends as well. So one of the things I always loved about you were very grounded and loyal to the people in your life.
Yeah, look, it's true. I have had many different sets of friends through my life, between Castlerea, going to college, my friends in London, and then back to Galway. Joined a wonderful organization called Junior Chamber of Galway. It was a great way to meet people when I came to London.
When you came to Galway.
Or came to Galway, came from London. One of my friends in London was Jerry Nyland, and he had a brother he came from Galway, and he had a brother who still lived in Galway, Derek Nyland. And he not only introduced me to Junior Chamber, but also to Corinthians Rugby Club, where again met many good friends there. And on then through work, again, many more friends there. And I still look. You can't keep in touch with everyone all the time, but I know I could pick up the phone and talk to somebody who I haven't talked to in years, as if I just met them yesterday. And that's just a pleasure. That it's just something that's very I don't know how to put it.
Well, they're there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You just know
they're there
they're
for you.
there. It's something that you can rely on if you need it, and it is
Yeah.
it's a great benefit to have that.
Well, in particular, through this last year, which we're going to go into, but we've realized the value of real friends and true friends when it comes down to, being in a hard place or going through a crisis or a challenge in your life, and the friends that are there for you. And both of us have really seen the value of true friendship. I mean, we all have lots of friends and acquaintances, but the real true friendships, they really do shine, don't they, John, in challenging times?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a huge amount of friends, not just our close friends, but an extended group of friends, and acquaintances, through both my work and Sharon's work, and the messages of support that I've had over the last few years from people I know and people I don't even know have been overwhelming, and a great source of energy to me. But in particular, my very close friends, who they're always checking in on me, taking me for lunch, making sure that if there's anything they can do, that they're there for me. And that has really helped me get through this and to stay positive.
Lovely. Yeah, very good. So, John, we go back to, the meeting and, we weren't sure, could we ever go any further, meaning get married and all of that. And We did. But before we got married, we had an unexpected gift in our lives. And that gift was our firstborn, Matthew, who Matthew said it's the only one of my podcasts he's going to listen to. Well, that's children for you. But Matthew was born in 2000. And we had planned to get married in the April of 2000. But obviously, when we found out we were pregnant, and hello, you can say, it was unexpected. We were practicing, obviously. But again, these things happen. And I believe that every little soul is meant to be born into this world. And it was a little bit frightening, as most things that are not planned in this world. But he was a very welcome gift into our lives. And John, being from that background, of being structured and grounded and having things in place, he was a little bit all over the place because he wanted to, have the perfect foundation for a child being born. But the perfect foundation was the two of us together, wasn't it, John? It was loving each other and learning to trust each other more, even during these times of unexpected challenges, as we've learned now in the last few years.
Yeah, there's no such thing as the perfect environment. I think you can have all the physical things in place. You can have a house, financial security, all of that. But I think the most important thing is to have parents who are with each other and trusting each other, and that there's happiness in the family. That is the greatest foundation, I think. And I think we were lucky that that's what we had. And we were so delighted when we learned the news that we were going to have a little arrival. Albeit the timing wasn't perfect, but as I say, nothing's perfect. But as long as you're happy doing it, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. So as Matthew was born, it took him 3 days to actually be born, and he's still hanging around. Thanks, Matthew. And after that, we still went ahead with our wedding plans because we wanted to celebrate. And he was 3 months old when we got married. And we had the most wonderful day again with friends and family, and we celebrated like we always celebrated. We partied until the early hours of the morning with everyone that was close to us, dancing around and having a great time. And then the next day we had to go back to being mom and dad to a 3-month-old. And eventually we did get going on a honeymoon, and your mom looked after Matthew, and your mom and dad. And I think that was the first time that your dad ever bottle fed a baby. I think your mother was telling me, and he was quite nervous about it. But because it was his grandchild, maybe he wasn't as nervous. I don't know.
Yeah, of course he was nervous. As I say, it was the first time. It was, even though it wasn't his first grandchild, it was the first grandchild who he had a lot of close contact with, and very close while we were on honeymoon.
Yeah.
So that was a new experience for him, but something he came to love. And he was a very loving grandchild, our grandfather, very caring, always looking out for them. He used to say to me, don't be too hard on that young lad.
Yeah.
And I always remember that. And anytime I find myself maybe, giving out to Matthew a little bit or something, not nowadays, but back when he was younger, I always remember that coming back into my head. Don't be too hard on him.
Yeah.
And Matthew, I'm sorry if I was hard on you sometimes, but hopefully I wasn't too hard on you.
So yeah, and I'm grateful to your parents and to my mother as well, because they were a big support when we had our first child, obviously, and moving house and trying to get settled in. They were all very supportive, and I know that even remembering your family coming up and sowing the lawn for us, and things like that. There's loads of memories, and your mom looking after the kids for us whenever we wanted to go to a wedding or something, and Sylvia, your sister, and and even Caroline, my sister, minding Matthew when I went back to work. All of these new things we have to experience, and we have been blessed with family support all through the years and still are, thankfully. So we then went on to have another little surprise, and that was Scott, who was born in 2001, September 2001. So there's only 21 months between them. And Scott gave us lots of surprises and still is throughout our life. But again, anyone that knows me, you will know everything about Scott that we share about, but we're not going to talk about Scott's story on our podcast because that's up to him to speak about when he wants to. But we are so proud of him and so proud of his courage and his strength and his resilience. Because if you were listening to this, Scott, and I know you're so proud of your dad for all he's come through as well, but we're very proud of both of our children. They show us every day that we did our best and that we have instilled in them, you know, a good foundation and to value and respect themselves and others, and hopefully family, that they will always be able to come back at any stage to us and that we'll talk openly.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. So proud of our children. As you say, they show us a new way. Maybe it's the new generation, and they do things a little bit differently to the way we did it, as we did it differently to the way our parents do it. But always instilled in that is a respect for everyone that they know, and an acceptance of things, and so proud of them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, John. Me
Mm.
too. So we're trying to give you a little background, you know, for anybody that hasn't, you know, or doesn't know the whole story of our lives. You don't need to, but we always like to give a little background into people and who we are. And before we're sharing, you know, what we've all experienced in the last while. But I want you to, we'll start with your dad really, because that's where the awareness really started for you. So your dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer when he was 55, 56?
Yeah. I think it was 56. Yeah. So he would have been diagnosed at the same age that I got my diagnosis.
Mm.
Um, he back then, of course, things were very different treatment wise. He didn't have surgery; he had radiotherapy, and after a while, he was through that, and he went into remission.
Mm.
I don't remember an awful lot about that time because I wasn't actually living at home then, and I was a little bit departed from it.
Yeah.
But it was a worrying time for the whole family.
Mm.
And after that, things did change because there was a realization that life is not permanent,
Mm.
and that we needed to be more aware that there were these things that we needed to keep a check on. It was a few years later that we discovered that it wasn't just my father who was diagnosed with prostate cancer. It was his brothers as well,
Mm.
both of his brothers, and so we knew that there was a strong family history there, and that it was something we needed to be aware of and needed to check on. So from the age of 40, I decided to go for annual checkups, to have my blood tested and my prostate checked, and thank goodness that I did.
Mm. So, and that's where, as I said, it started. And most people, you know, we're all living our lives and we're not thinking about death and we're not thinking about getting unwell. We're living our lives and we're busy doing that. But of course, when somebody close to you or a family member is diagnosed, it makes you more aware of, as you said, the passing of time and that we're not here forever and that we're all going to be faced with death or a challenge or an illness in our lives or in our family. And again, we'll all deal with that in our own way as it happens. So when you were getting your prostate checks from the age of 40, it was just an annual thing. You know, you weren't thinking about, I'll be diagnosed. You weren't worried about it. You just did it.
Yeah, I wasn't. You think you're resilient. You think I'll go through the motions, have the test, but it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it was.
Mm.
To the extent that there was a few years maybe where I might have missed times, but I always went back to it again.
Yeah.
It was always in the back of my head.
Mm.
Get the prostate checked.
Yeah.
It's and especially as time went on and prostate cancer became more known about.
Mm.
It was you'd hear about it, and I'd always remember my dad and his brothers and what potentially could happen to me.
Mm.
So I always went back to get my prostate and blood checked.
Yeah. So we'll just go back to your dad for a moment because obviously a very important figure in your life. So your dad obviously got the all clear for the prostate cancer, and then going back, I don't know how was it 8 or 9 years later that he was diagnosed with a different form of cancer that they said wasn't related to the prostate.
Yeah, they didn't think it was related to the prostate. They weren't even sure exactly where the cancer originated, when he was diagnosed, but it was a very aggressive diagnosis, and it was a tough time for the whole family. It all happened so very quick. From the time he was diagnosed, he had passed in 12 weeks.
Mm,
As I say, a difficult time for the family, but we were all there. It brought us together
mm,
as a family as well, and we were all there for him right up until the end. He had been in hospital, of course, but he was at home for his final hours
mm,
back in his home near Ballinlaw, and it's it's very sad memories of that time, but you know, that is part of life. And we're just very grateful that we had him for the time we had him.
mm. Because he
Mm.
was only 65 when he passed away,
65, yeah.
which was so young.
Mm.
And I know young people listening and think 65 is old, but as we're getting closer and closer, once you start coming up in age, you realize that 65 is so very young. 75 and 85 is very young, and we
Mm.
all want to live as long. And your dad had such a vitality for life, and your mom and dad were a great couple, and they really enjoyed their lives and dancing and playing cards and loving the family around and the grandchildren. And your dad really doted on, as you said, his grandchildren. So he was a huge loss in your lives, and that presence, that strong figure, wasn't he? He was a huge loss in the family.
He was, yeah, for sure. It was a big gap. Still a big gap. Not just for me and my siblings, but for the grandchildren as well.
Mm,
He had, at that stage, he had many grandchildren, of course. Loved his grandchildren. It was. I remember in one day in the hospital,
mm,
talking to him, and I think that was the thing that actually made him the saddest. Knowing
mm,
that he was going to go was that he wouldn't see his grandchildren growing up.
yeah,
And I used to say to him, "But sure, you will, you will see
yeah.
them
In a different
in
way.
a different way." Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was in the hospital with you that day and I could see him looking at Matthew and Scott and going, and you could see the sadness and you could hear it in his voice. And he was in a lot of pain at the time.
Mm,
But his grandchildren were proof that they loved him too, because all over the wall was pictures from all of his grandkids just beside his hospital bed,
mm.
and he was proudly showing them off to everyone that came in. But another thing was that you were a great um, family and an advocate for your dad, which we want to kind of stress is that family have to be advocates for their loved ones in hospital as well, to be their voice, to be present for them. And even though your family are scattered all over the place, everyone took turns in coming in to look after him and shower him and wash him and help him with feeding and moving around and all of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's as good as the hospital were, and particularly in the cancer ward that he was in, the staff up there were fantastic, but they have limited resources, and having an extended family was you almost have to, because they can't do everything. They can't
Mm,
take him to the toilet every time he needs to go, or wash him, or shave him, simple things like that. Um, there was always, coming from a family of six, we had the help. We were lucky.
mm,
There was always somebody with him there, even right through the night.
mm,
We would take turns staying there at night time, particularly in the end. And it was a pleasure to be able to do that for him, and for my mother. It was a great relief for my mother
mm,
to know that there was always somebody there with him.
mm.
Um, and yeah, great. We were very grateful to the hospital for the care that they gave him, but we're grateful that we were able to extend that care, and
Mm.
be there for him as well.
What do you think the biggest lesson you learned from your dad was?
Um, I think. just acceptance, accept everybody as they are. Um, my dad, his work ethic was fantastic. Um, that's all he knew was to keep going, keep working, and work for other people.
Mm.
But he was always very accepting. Had a great balance, between what needed to be done and what should be done. Um, a great balance between work and life as well. I think that's probably one of the greatest things I remember. His balance between work and life. Not too much work.
Your
Plenty
dad, not too much work.
well, really, a lot of his work was living the way he wanted to live.
And he enjoyed his farming and
Yeah,
he enjoyed the music
yeah.
and he retired early from nursing, which, he was busier than ever, I think, after he finished his psychiatric nursing career.
He was, yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously there was more time for farming, so the farm got a little bit bigger, more machinery, and of course he still went back and helped out in some of the
Yeah.
psychiatric units,
Mm,
um, and again plenty more time to be a musician as well. So
yeah.
yeah, right through his life, right up to the very end, he was always very active in everything that he did,
Mm,
but he had a very good balance between work and life and family. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And we'll talk about your lovely mom in a minute as well, because she's still here and still supporting you as we move through your own journey. But the loss of your dad, as I said, had a huge impact on everybody in your family and grandchildren and everybody. But you still feel your dad very much around you, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very aware that he's still with us in spirit and watches over us every day. Um, you know, through Sharon's work, I would meditate from time to time, and I have times connected with my father in spirit, and it's brings such joy to do that.
Mm.
And thankfully, Sharon brought that
Hmm.
element of spiritualism into my life, and I was able to do that.
Mm. And it's so beautiful because I think it's a huge thing. We're all going to deal with grief in our lives and loss. As I said, it's natural, but knowing that their energy exists beyond the physical is a comfort, isn't it? It's a peace, John.
It's a great comfort. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's probably the perfect word for it. It's a comfort knowing that they're not just gone, that there's not just a vacuum, that
Hmm.
they are still there watching over us. He's listening in today, I can
Yeah.
be
Hi,
sure,
Jim.
and and always will be, always will be. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely, John.
Mm.
Thank you. So, as I said, your mom is still here and an amazing lady. Her strength is just amazing, as is in my own mother's, and I think again we get to appreciate that when we become parents and we see all that they've had to go through, and things for them might have been tougher again in their lives and made it a bit easier for us, but things are always tough.
Mm.
But your mother is straight out. She says it as it is. And she has been, I suppose, a very grounding force also in your life, hasn't she? She's kind of taken no nonsense. She wants you to do well. And she's not afraid to say how proud she is of all her children.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a very loving mother. Quite a strict enough upbringing, but that's the way that we wouldn't have had it any other way.
Mm.
Today she's a lot more tolerable of us, but then again, we are adults now. But still very loving and caring. She's a very active person herself. It was tough on her when my father passed. Especially in the early years. But she had her family around her,
Good
and
friends.
good friends, and she did take a break from some of her social stuff for a while, but slowly got back into that again.
Mm.
Great love of Irish dancing and Cayley music, card playing and cycling and walking. So she's
Mm.
always been, again, a bit like my father, very active outside in the house and with a social life,
Mm.
and but but always family is the most important thing, and
Mm.
loves her family, loves her grandchildren, loves taking care of them, and loves her great grandchild now. She has
Yeah.
a great grandchild now at the stage, in
Yeah.
a year and a half, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. So yeah, that's my mom. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. And I think it's important to acknowledge, the people in your lives as you're talking about your own story, because a lot of those support systems, whether it be family or friends, are the ones that are really important to you when it comes to facing a challenge or crisis in your own life. So we're moving on to you now, John, directly on to you. It's all
No.
about you, John. So, as you were talking about going for your prostate testing, from your 40s and getting regular annual checks with that blood test or the physical prostate test, and I think you actually only missed 1 year, and that was probably due to COVID or something like that. We can't even remember. But you went back in February 23.
February 23 was yeah, late February 23, and I was a little bit lucky, I suppose. I had a little brown spot up here just over on the side of my eye, and my fantastic wife Sharon kept going to me, you need to get that checked, you need to get that checked. I was going, that's fine, don't worry about it.
Mm,
And I says, look, I'll be going for a blood test soon. So she says, just go, just go. So I went probably earlier than I would have gone for the blood test, um, to my GP. And so we did the blood test, the physical examination. The physical examination of the prostate didn't show any abnormality. Um, the spot in my eye was something which has a name about this long and I can't remember, but he said, look, there's nothing to worry about. I'll freeze it off today and that'll be done. So he did that. But in 2 weeks' time, then the blood results came back, and that's when I got news that I didn't really want to hear. And
yeah. So I can remember at that time. So John came back and he said, I got my blood test results and my PSA is rather high. And I went, what's it supposed to be? And he said, it's supposed to be 3. And I said, and what are yours? And he said, 23. And I went, oh, is that bad? And he said, well, I don't know. It's high and they're worried about it. But we still didn't know enough about it, John, really, did we?
no, and I think the GP was a little bit shocked actually,
Mm,
because the words he used actually was through the roof.
mm,
So I think it was almost disbelief or something. He said, "Look, we'll do it again," because he said there are other reasons why the PSA might be temporarily high.
mm,
So he said, "We'll do the blood test again." So came in, took another sample, and this time the bloods were back a lot quicker, because it was just PSA, and the results were the same again.
mm.
So that's when
Alarm
the
bells.
alarm bells started ringing. And he said, right, he said, I'm going to set you up with a urology consultant and they will take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you went on then to MRIs and biopsies, and all of that confirmed that, there was something present, but you didn't know what that was until you went to the actual urology consultant, which I was present for because I
Yeah.
was demanding to be in and knowing all the details.
Mm.
Because and that's one thing I would say as well, if someone you love is going through something, and if they give you permission, because I know some people won't, but it's really important for them to have support during this as well, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that they are listening, almost, they're not an observer, but they're witnessing what's being said. So in case that the person, the patient, we'll call you,
Mm.
misses anything.
Yeah.
So going into the urologist consultant and hearing the words, what did he say to you?
Um, well, I mean, before we get to that, I mean, I think you're so right about having somebody there. It was not just a benefit for me. It was good to have that support there because you never know how you're going to react when you hear news like that. Um, so to have somebody there supporting you that knows you and you trust was great. But also for that person because they're feeling exactly the same thing, and if they're isolated from it all, then it's so much worse for them. At least if they're there and they're there with you, it just makes it that bit easier. And then there's also the thing, if you weren't there listening to everything, then I'd have to be repeating everything that was said when,
Back to me
when I
again.
when I got back home. So better that you hear it firsthand. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but to hear, yeah. So the diagnosis was it was a grade 5 cancer in the prostate gland, and grade 5 being the most aggressive cancer. So yeah, it was devastating news. It was. I don't think I was too shocked because all the stages that led me to that point were hinting towards that anyway. I suppose the fact that it was an aggressive one was a little bit more shocking. Um, but as I say, thankful to have Sharon there with me, and she was going to be there with me through all the stages. So the consultant outlined the path forward from there. The surgery first of all, and then further checks after that, and then possibly further treatment after that.
So again, you can't deal with all that's ahead of you because you have to come and deal with the news you've just heard. And I know that I was shocked because, again, I am always saying there is such a negative energy around the word cancer. I used to say, I wish they'd fucking call it something else, because the minute they say that, we all start getting afraid, And the one important thing was that John had no signs or symptoms. He had nothing. He was so healthy. He was exercising. He was working. There was nothing out of the ordinary, you could say, that John would have led him to say, God, I should get a blood test. I'd be worried about my prostate or anything else. There was nothing apart from the brown mark that I used to be sitting beside him and going, you want to get that checked out? You're quite dark now, John. That could be something else. Go and get it checked out, which he did, thankfully, but it was nothing. But that day, as a person that loves John very much, it was a shock, because what happens is in our mind is we start going into that fear. And what does that mean? And oh my God, is this serious? And what are we going to do? And all of these thoughts are going through your head. But one of the things I've learned, I suppose, through my own practice, but also John being so grounded and taking things day by day, was we can only deal with this now. And I remember when we came out the door and I put my arm around your waist and I said, are you okay, darling? How do you feel? And John went, I feel okay. He said, I'm just worried about how Mam and the kids will take it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was the thing that struck me the most, I think. I am a grounded person, I suppose. People say I am, but I know I am. So I am able to take things like that. But I did worry about my own children, my mother, my siblings, because of the history they had and the loss they had through cancer. I did worry how they were going to take this news, because as Sharon says, the word cancer does instill fear in people, and to hear somebody close to you who is afflicted with that can be devastating. But I think because I am accepting of it, I think that did help them to accept it also.
Yeah. So one of the first things we did was, I suppose, as a couple, was we went out to Ballylahan Beach, I think, wasn't it? We went out and had a coffee, and we sat by the beach, and we'd always talk things through and just deal with how we're feeling in that moment, and really just sitting with the emotions and what we were feeling. So I do remember that day. That was the 14th of June. You were diagnosed, or given the diagnosis, 2023. And we were talking about how we would tell the kids. Now, they obviously knew you were going in to see the consultant, you were going to get news one way or the other. So we asked the kids to, so we could all sit down, the four of us. And I remember Matthew just couldn't wait, remember? But we were saying, let's all go home and sit down, which they did. And Scott came home and we sat out in the back, and it was a lovely sunny day. And we sat down and John just shared exactly what you do. He shared exactly, in facts, what had happened. And you could see the kids' reaction. And of course, I was watching the kids' reaction and watching you, seeing how you were telling them. And were they all okay? Did they feel safe even with this news? And I know it was a little, there's some of them, we won't name anyone, Matthew, were a bit more emotional. And because it's very hard news to see your, as Matthew would have said, and even Scott, that they see John as this, like your own dad, a very strong person, you know, never been unwell, always there for everybody. And all of a sudden, there's this prospect of you not being well and getting sick. And the worst prospect is not being around, which we will all face in life. But you assured them, you know, that you were in good hands now and that you would share everything with them as openly as possible. And John also said as well, he said, you can ask me any questions, but he said, I might know the answers all the time to that, which is really important to say as well, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, you mentioned there that I was very factual about it. And I think that, you know, sticking to the facts did help me to get my head around a lot of it. And knowing that, um, because I knew the facts, I knew there was a course of treatment. I knew there was a good outcome, and I was positive about that. And me knowing that and sharing that with them did help them to cope with it, I think, as well. Like, you know,
Mm,
that it wasn't just, you know, oh, you have cancer, you're done for. You know, it was, look, I have a disease that is very treatable, and there is a good outcome out of this. You know,
mm,
and that helped them cope with it. That
yeah,
certainly helped me cope with it.
yeah, and me too. And I suppose then when John may not have been there, I know I would be having conversations with them or with other people, which again was important. So I would say, as the partner or sibling or whoever of the person that has been diagnosed, it's very important for you to also look after your emotional and mental state as well, because of
Mm,
course you feel helpless. And that's one of the things I said openly to John. I felt helpless at times, like that I couldn't go in and fix him. Not that he had to be fixed, but that I couldn't take this disease away from him and just make him be all right. It was something that he had to go through himself physically, mentally, and emotionally. But that we also had to honor how we were feeling. So we'd always check in with each other and the kids, how they were feeling, letting them know that, because Matthew would say sometimes to Scott, like, how is dad really? And I'd say he's great, really he is. He's not pretending. He actually is really good and he feels good about this. But everyone was worrying, even your siblings were like, how is he really?
mm,
you know, because
yeah.
John is, you don't get really emotional about things. You're a very emotional person, but you don't get over emotional. You don't over exaggerate. That's the thing. So people were
Mm,
checking in to see if you actually were okay, which was really lovely.
mm,
And then when you had your surgery and everything, because this is important to say, there are stages, okay? There's stages that you go through. It's not just go in, there's this, and this, but the stages you went through, the surgery and the recovery of the surgery and giving yourself that space and time to really recuperate. And, which you did, you allowed yourself to rest at home and not be rushing back into work.
yeah. And I mean, that was my treatment, and everyone's diagnosis and everyone's treatment can be different. But for
Mm,
me, the treatment was first of all surgery, and it was a major surgery. But it was robotic surgery, not just robots like Star Wars, as Sharon
yeah.
once said, but precise medical robotic surgery, which is controlled by the surgeons. Then it's known as the Da Vinci robot. Fabulous piece of equipment if
Mm,
anyone wants to look it up. Um, but the benefit of having that type of surgery is it really aids in recovery and reduces the risk of infection.
mm,
So grateful that they did have that sort of technology available in Galway.
mm,
Um, but even so, there is still, it was recommended that I take at least a month off work after the surgery. So I elected to take 6 weeks off work, and grateful then that I did, because I think that extra time that I took, which allowed my body to heal, um, aided me later then when I wanted to get back to activity,
mm,
and I was able to return to full activity fairly quickly after that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I loved best about John and being at home for the 6 weeks. The weather was good. The rugby World Cup was on. Some say John had that planned. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Obviously not, but he was grateful that it was on. But you know what I thought was amazing was that we were able to spend 6 weeks together at home. And even though we're together since 1994, we have never spent 6 weeks together from waking to sleep
Probably not.
ever. And most people don't. They spend their 2 weeks on holidays and maybe they have kids and whatever else and doing their own thing. But we actually used to get up and sit outside and have our coffee and have our breakfast, and we chat and have lunch together and dinner together. And it was just the most beautiful time. And that's what I think. Sometimes these awful things happen in life, that we consider awful, but we looked at it as a blessing in so many ways. As you said, getting that cancer diagnosis actually saved your life.
I do say that, yeah. And there's different reasons for that, and one of them, of course, is that as close as we were, it did actually bring us closest together. It certainly did, and yeah, those 6 weeks were wonderful, actually. But also, one of the reasons I say that is because it did force me, with the help of Sharon, to look at my diet, what I was eating, lots of other aspects of my life, and we made some changes, both of us, and for the better. So now, as a result of that, I actually feel healthier, more energetic, more alive than I did before I got the diagnosis. Despite still having cancer, I actually feel better than I did before. I know that might sound crazy to say, but that is a fact.
Yeah. And I think you hear a lot of people saying that when they're faced with the prospect of death or giving a diagnosis, they actually most people start living better because they want to live and they realize, God, I really don't want to go this quick. And then other people may not be, because again, their treatment might be different. Like my own mother's, she was quite unwell through a lot of her treatment. She tried to continue doing what she was doing, but there was times she just wasn't able to do it. So you've been very lucky in your treatment, and that you haven't been unwell enough to be able to go out and do your work and, be involved in whatever you want to do in your life. You've been very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, and I have, and as I say, I've never been sick with this. I've never had any real symptoms, or any symptoms at all, other than the PSA blood test. And I have been able to continue with a full active life, with my work, my rugby interests, refereeing the different committees, stewarding, even taking up a bit more golf since all this happened. Always been able to keep doing that, and I think that has actually benefited me as well. I think being active and being fit has helped me physically to get through it and to stay well. Being well helps you to stay well.
Absolutely. Very good, John. Yeah, it's so true. So now we're at the point where you've just finished 7 weeks of radiotherapy, 33 sessions, going in every day, 5 days a week, and taking a break at the weekend, and going to work and continuing to do what you could do outside of that. And the only thing I think that really affected you physically was tiredness from it. But other than that, you were quite good, weren't you?
Yeah. I was able to keep working. I was even to do tag refereeing right up until the finals in the middle of July. And there was very little effect for me from the radiotherapy, other than, as you say, a little bit of tiredness in the evenings, which is more probably emotional tiredness than anything, and again, I think one of the reasons I have been able to do that is because I had been fit going into it, and that definitely did help.
Absolutely, yeah. So everyone thinks now, when you had the surgery and the radiotherapy, and even people have messaged, it's so great, he's over it now and he's done. And because John looks so well, everyone thinks, oh, sure, that's it, he's grand now. But what a lot of people don't know is that John is also on 2 other treatments. a tablet form and an injection form, which you will be on for and further 18 months.
About that into early 2026. Yeah,
Yeah.
I started on these two treatments at the beginning of this year, January 24. I say one is an injection which I get once every 3 months, and the other are tablets which I take daily. They're both kind of doing the same thing. They're hormone reduction tablets, and when I say hormone, I mean testosterone.
Yeah.
Testosterone feeds cancer cells, so if you reduce the testosterone, it
Keeps the
starves
PSA down.
starves the cancer cells, and that keeps the PSA down. So my PSA level at the moment is to be technical about it, it's less than 0.02, which is what they call undetectable, and that's where it needs to be. So as long as it stays down there, fingers crossed, in 2 years' time or whenever I've finished with the medication and done the further tests after that, that's where it will stay, and I'll be right as rain.
Yeah.
Mm.
So basically, you're living with cancer, and that's what you've been doing since your diagnosis. And many people live with cancer, but maybe in a different way, and they do feel the effects of it and of the medication, which you've been blessed that you haven't had any big, huge side effects, and it hasn't affected you apart from taking the time off after surgery.
Yeah, but that was the biggest one. Obviously, while I was going through radiation, there were some time restraints on work and socializing, family, and things. But that was just 7 weeks. It's not that long, really.
No.
For some people, it's not even 7 weeks. And as for the medication, there is one small side effect. And anybody who's familiar with the female menopause, it's I get the hot flashes.
I said to John, welcome to my world.
So they can interrupt my sleep a little bit, but apart from that, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
You don't even know they're there. So I have been very lucky, and hopefully it'll continue that way.
You were hot stuff before, now you're just extra hot. So your message really is to people, whether it is, no matter what gender you are listening to, it's, I suppose it is about prostate checking and getting your blood test and your prostate checked physically, but it's for everybody really to get their blood test done annually, isn't it?
Yeah, the message from me is particularly related to prostate cancer and the importance of, if you are over 40, and there's a history of it in your family,
or even if there isn't.
Even if there isn't, then they say over 50, but I would say for everyone, once you hit 40, you just start getting your checks done.
Yeah.
What is it? Once a half an hour every year, and it's done.
From your GP.
Yeah, and it is so important. A simple test that can save your life, and it certainly did for me.
It certainly did, and we're so grateful to it.
Mm.
So, John, what would your message be, just talking about it again, because we know you did a talk for the Association of Connacht Referees branch. What was it, last weekend or the weekend before?
Last weekend, yeah.
Yeah. And somebody already out of that group has come up to you and say they went and got a check. Everything was okay, but because of your talk and the awareness you raised at that talk, that they've gone and got a check.
Yeah, I've always been very open about my diagnosis and my treatment and everything. I always talk to people, tell them what's going on, because people do worry in it, and it helps to know that I am being well looked after and that I am okay. But also to make them aware that of this and what they should be doing for themselves. It brightened me, when somebody did. It was only yesterday somebody came up to me and said, look, because of what you said, I went and had a check, and everything was okay, thank God.
Yeah.
But he'll continue to have that done now. And that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get more people aware that they need to be having these tests but also to be okay talking about it. I mean, have the conversations. It's not a taboo subject. It's okay to talk about it, and it's good to talk about it, and be open about it. And it's not, and again, as I say, in particular, I'm talking about prostate cancer, but it's, it's breast cancer, it's all the other forms of cancer, um, don't just wait until it's too late,
Mm,
go and have your health checks, talk to your family, talk to your GP, talk to your friends. There's loads of support out there.
mm,
Get talking. That's the biggest message.
yeah.
Mm.
Thank you, John. But for you personally, having been faced with that diagnosis and being a young man, wink, wink, being a young man and having to tell your family and having to go through it and watch everybody's own emotional response to you or the fear of losing you, what have you felt throughout it all? And even now, just again talking about it. I know you're on my podcast, your wife, but
Mm.
just again, how has it been for you? Like, has there been at any stage that there was any fear of anything for you? Or even, facing death, because, sometimes that's what a diagnosis makes you think about. What have you felt throughout it all?
Yeah, I suppose I've never been afraid of that. I mean, I've lived a good life. I've lived a happy life, and I've been very grateful for the people in my life. And eventually, death will come to my door, and I'll have no regrets.
Mm.
Um, not that I want to die. I want to keep living. I want to be around, but I've never had a fear of that. And I know that when I do eventually pass, it's not the end.
Mm,
I'll still be around in spirit. I know that. I'm very aware of that, and that's helped me to accept it, and be comfortable with it. But it's not just about me either. I mean, it's my feelings are not just my own. It's other people's feelings for me. I have to be aware of that too. When I go, um, I'll have no regrets on my life, but there will be people left behind who will have regret because I'm gone, maybe, so you kind of consider that, um, and you have to be aware of that and how they might feel. So yeah, I don't know. It's family, my parents,
mm,
siblings, you know, they're the people who are most affected when I might go.
yeah,
So that's, I suppose, my greatest fear, not for myself, but for the ones left behind.
yeah. But that is part of our journey, isn't it? Saying goodbye, or the fear of losing people, when it's going to be part of our natural progression as a human, isn't it? That we're all going to leave this earthly home.
Mm.
But again, through watching you being so grounded in, and I know having that conversation, and I said, "Are you afraid of dying?" And you said, "No, because I've had a great life." But like, you want to continue living, and we want you to continue living, but that you felt
Mm.
very blessed and grateful. And I suppose that put me at ease when there's no fear around it as well.
Mm.
But again, I suppose everyone is different, and Matthew and Scott could have a different way of looking at it, or they don't think about it, or whatever it is. What do you want to say to your two beautiful children?
That your dad is fine. Uh, he does have a condition that has been treated, and the outcome is good. And I'm going to be around for a long time yet, and I'm going to continue to love you and be proud of you. Love you both. Mm.
Lovely.
Mm.
You make me
Mm.
emotional. Yeah, well, I'm so proud of you, and thank you for coming on to the podcast and sharing, because I know that I'm very open and honest about everything. And sometimes, not that I expect,
Mm.
but I would always hope people would be able to share their story. And because you're my most amazing, lovely husband, John, I'm so proud of you. I think you have such resilience. I've seen you be there for everybody. And I am so glad that everyone was there for you, and still are, as you're going through this as well, because you give so much of yourself to everybody else. And it's nice to see that people wanted to hold space for you and support you, because you deserve it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your return to your podcast. And I could say ditto right back to you. I'm so proud of the work that you do and the help that you give to people. And I think everybody listening to this will echo that sentiment. You are the most fabulous person I have ever known, and I love you loads.
Oh, I
Mm.
love you too. Here's me trying to hold back the tear in my eye. And so thank you, John Fitzmaurice, extraordinaire. I'm really grateful that you came on and shared. And I hope that whoever is listening, whether it be yourself that needs to get checked, or especially for the men in your life, that you would encourage them to go and get their health checks, their prostate checked, and not to be waiting until there's signs and symptoms. As John said, he looked healthy, he felt healthy, but he had an aggressive cancer diagnosis. And what's worrying is if John had not gone and got the blood test when he did, he may not be sitting here right now. So we are grateful every moment of every day to still have him in our lives, and we want him around for a long time. So I hope this has raised a little bit of awareness. If you could, please share it with your friends and family, with your friend groups, on any groups that you're on, and that hopefully that will ripple out to other people, and they will know that it just takes a blood test. And for all of us, it's a simple blood test. Go and get checked out. Look after yourself. Be your wonderful self. And you can still live a great life, even if you are diagnosed, and if you are unwell at this time, look after yourself. Ask people for support. Don't be trying to do it all on your own. There are people willing to help you. So I want to thank you on my return to my podcast. I'm delighted to be back and to have John as my guest as I return. And I can't wait to share more amazing and resilient stories with you. So until then, take care and look after you.